A man lies on an operating table. His heart has stopped. His brain shows zero activity. For 4 minutes, doctors believed this man was dead. Then he woke up and described something impossible. He said he watched the operation from above his own body. And according to the monitors, he shouldn't have seen anything at all. If you're here, you've probably asked the question at some point in your life: what actually happens when we die? Not what religion says, not what your culture tells you to believe, but what actually, verifiably, scientifically happens. Today we're going to look at one of the most studied, most documented, and most unexplained cases in the history of consciousness research. And by the end of this video, I promise you, you won't look at death the same way again. Let's start with the man himself. His identity is protected for medical privacy. What matters is what happened to him. He was a middle-aged man, no prior history of spiritual beliefs, no religious upbringing to speak of. A self-described skeptic, the kind of person who rolls his eyes at ghost stories and psychics. He went in for routine cardiac surgery. Routine, the kind of procedure done thousands of times every day around the world. But something went wrong. His heart stopped. Not briefly, it stopped long enough that the medical team had to perform full resuscitation. For nearly 4 minutes, long enough that brain damage should have been certain, by every clinical measure, this man was dead. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no blood pressure. And then they brought him back. When he woke up, the medical team expected the usual: confusion, disorientation, maybe some memory loss from the trauma. What they got instead was something they were completely unprepared for. He looked at the lead surgeon and said, "I watched you from up there. I saw everything you did." And then he described in precise detail the instruments used, the words spoken in the room, even a specific gesture the surgeon made at a critical moment, details he could not possibly have known, details that were later verified. But the physical observations were just the beginning. He described leaving his body, looking down at himself on the table, feeling, and this is the word almost every NDE survivor uses, more real than he had ever felt while alive, not dreaming, not hallucinating, more real. He described moving through what he called a transition, a shift in his awareness, like moving from a small dark room into an open field on the clearest day imaginable. He described an overwhelming sense of being known, completely seen, not judged, just understood. He described encountering what he could only call presences, not people exactly, but familiar, loving. And then he said he was shown something, a kind of review, not a punishment, not a reward, just a clear, compassionate seeing of his life. Every moment, every choice, every person he had ever affected. He said the most painful part wasn't seeing his mistakes. It was feeling, truly feeling, how his actions had affected others, the ripple of every kindness and every cruelty. And then he was back, gasping, disoriented, alive, and completely, permanently changed. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Because this man's experience is not unique, it is not rare. According to a landmark 2001 study published in The Lancet, one of the world's most respected medical journals, researchers studied 344 cardiac arrest patients in the Netherlands, patients who had been clinically dead and then resuscitated. 18% of them reported some form of conscious experience during the period when they had no measurable brain activity. 18%. That's not a rounding error. That's not noise in the data. Dr. Pim van Lommel, the cardiologist who led the study, wrote that the results were inexplicable by current neuroscientific models. Meanwhile, in the UK, Dr. Sam Parnia, a critical care physician at NYU, has spent decades running what he calls the AWARE study. AWARE stands for Awareness During Resuscitation. His team placed hidden visual targets, images that could only be seen from above, in cardiac resuscitation rooms. The idea: if patients truly leave their bodies during cardiac arrest, they should be able to report what was on those targets. The results so far are inconclusive, but not in the way skeptics hoped. Several patients reported accurate out-of-body perceptions. One case, now widely cited, involved a patient accurately describing the actions of medical staff in a room he had never seen, from a vantage point that was physically impossible from the operating table. Dr. Parnia's conclusion: that consciousness may not be produced by the brain, but rather received by it. Like a radio receiving a signal that exists independently of the hardware. Now I want to be fair here, because science has tried very hard to explain NDEs without invoking anything unusual. The leading conventional explanations include oxygen deprivation, the brain hallucinating as it shuts down due to lack of oxygen, REM intrusion, dream state mechanisms activating at the wrong time, endorphin release, the brain flooding itself with feel-good chemicals as a kind of self-comfort mechanism, and temporal lobe stimulation, electrical activity in specific brain regions producing vivid experiences. These are serious hypotheses. They deserve to be taken seriously. But here's the problem. Every single one of these explanations requires the brain to be active, to be producing something, and in the most documented NDE cases, including the man we discussed at the start, the brain wasn't active. The EEG was flat. There was nothing there to produce a hallucination, nothing to generate a dream, nothing to release endorphins. And yet, the experience happened. Vivid, coherent, verifiable in its external details, and in many cases more clear and more real than any waking experience the person had ever had. That's the part science hasn't explained. And the honest scientists, the ones worth listening to, will tell you that openly. So what do we do with this? I'm not going to tell you what to believe. That's not what this channel is about. What I will say is this: the question of what happens when we die is not a question that belongs only to priests and philosophers. It is a scientific question, a human question. And the evidence, however incomplete, is pointing somewhere genuinely unexpected. The man we talked about today went into surgery a skeptic. He came out unable to dismiss what he'd experienced, not because he wanted to believe something comforting, but because the experience was simply too real, too coherent, and too verifiable to dismiss. He didn't become religious. He became curious. And maybe that's the right response. Not certainty, not dismissal, curiosity. If this resonated with you, I made a free guide breaking down the patterns researchers have found across thousands of these experiences. Link below. If this video made you think, made you question, made you want to know more, then this channel is for you. Every week we go deeper into consciousness, into what science is quietly discovering about the nature of the mind, into the greatest mystery any of us will ever face. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And in the comments, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had an experience you couldn't explain? Have you lost someone and wondered where they went? This is a space for real conversation. Leave your thoughts below. This is Beyond Flatline. See you on the other side.